What is up, everybody? Welcome back to the channel. So recently I did a podcast where I talked in depth about sort of the recent history of Star Wars as it has existed as a franchise. And I wanted to follow that up with this sort of abbreviated version of the podcast where I talk about the first two episodes of the Ahsoka series. That podcast was sort of motivated by the debut of that series and how this may play into the overall success or failure of Star Wars as a franchise. So I watched the first two episodes, and I've actually watched them several times over and over because they are actually very good. I love the series so far. It's not perfect. There are a few missteps here and there, but overall, I'm very intrigued by the story. It's probably the most interesting thing I've seen from Star Wars in a while. I think probably the thing that I got most excited about recently would be Tales of the Jedi. And I'd say that this is pretty near to the same quality. Now, most of the story kind of focuses on our heroes, basically Ahsoka, Sabine, and Hera, and their journey to kind of unravel a mystery. But I'm actually more interested in talking about the villains of the show for this particular video because they are sort of the more mysterious side of it. There are three of the villains that are brand new characters. And Morgan Elsbeth, we knew a little bit about her based on the one episode of The Mandalorian where we saw her introduced as a character. But this sort of expands upon that. So she's not a new character, but what we learn about her is new. So it's quite interesting. I'd also like to discuss the end credit sequence. What happens in the end credits is basically there's these imagery showing various planets and so forth, and various fans have translated the text into English, so it reveals the names of various places in the Star Wars galaxy. So that's all very intriguing, and it sort of perhaps gives some clues as to the overall outline of the story going forward. So that's pretty cool. But I want to talk about the villains in particular. So it's revealed that Morgan Elsbeth is a Night Sister from the planet Dathomir. And it's also revealed that she has been communicated to by Thrawn, who is, he's basically been banished to another galaxy. And they show this sort of holographic map, which reveals the pathway to get to that galaxy. So she's actually building a device called the Eye of Sion to try and bring him back. It's just a gigantic device, and it's pretty intriguing. They're sort of in the process of finishing construction on that as we see these first two episodes. And she basically says that Thrawn has been calling to her across time and space, and it sort of brings up the possibility that maybe he has found access to the world between worlds, which would suggest that kind of communication. Or maybe it's more Night Sister magic. Maybe he has access to that in that other galaxy. So I'm sure it'll be revealed at some point how it is he's able to communicate with her. So there's three other villains that are introduced. Baylan Skoll is revealed to be a former Jedi Knight during the time period of the Clone Wars, and judging by his age, I'm guessing he was probably about the same age as Anakin Skywalker during that time period. And it's revealed in at least one of the trailers that he knew Anakin Skywalker. What relationship they had, if they sort of knew each other in passing, or what exactly that was, we'll find that out, I guess, eventually. Now, he has a young apprentice whose name is Shin Hati, and she is a little bit too young to have been around sort of in the Clone Wars time period. I mean, she might have been a child, very young child, during that time period. So we don't really know too much about her. All we know is that she's seems like very dedicated to Baylan's teaching. She also has like the Jedi braid, the sort of Padawan braid. So it would seem that she's still sort of learning the ways of the Force and so forth. So that's all interesting. Actually, the actress who plays Shin is actually doing a great job. She doesn't really speak that much, but something about the way she does the mannerisms and so forth makes her character seem very mysterious, and the look of the character seems very sort of anime influenced as well. So that's quite interesting. So we'll see what happens with that character. So the last character I want to talk about is called Marrok, and apparently he's former Inquisitor. These were the various kind of pseudo apprentices that were used by the Empire to sort of hunt down Jedi Knights. And we've seen them in Rebels, and we've seen them in the Obi-Wan Kenobi series and various other things. And my main question is, how did he survive past the end of Return of the Jedi? So basically, he outlasted Darth Vader and the Empire. And so there's a mystery there. And obviously, because it's a masked character, we don't know who's behind that mask. They haven't really spoken any words other than a few grunts and so forth. So a couple interesting things have come up. Marrok is actually a character in Arthurian tales who gets transformed by a witch in that story. So that's kind of an interesting thing. So it might have some suggestion about the origin of the name. There's also a lot of discussion about whether or not this is somebody that we're familiar with behind the mask. Now, I think the most likely thing is it's actually Ezra Bridger behind the mask, and that he may have been seduced by Morgan Elsbeth's witchcraft. So at the point in time where he, banishes Thrawn, out into the outer regions or whatever, and he disappears, maybe at that point, that's when Morgan found him and was able to convince him to help her find Thrawn, or help her in her missions. So that's a distinct possibility. And it would be kind of a shocking moment when the face reveal happens and Ahsoka and Sabine are shocked that their former friend is now working for the enemy, apparently. So yeah, I think that's probably the most likely thing. There's also the possibility that it could be a clone of Luke Skywalker or Anakin Skywalker behind the mask. So that would also be very strange. I think that's less likely. A lot of people have speculated that it might be a version of Starkiller, because they noticed that Sam Witwer's name is in the end credits. He was the actor who portrayed Starkiller, and visually appears like him in the video games and so forth. Starkiller, if you're not familiar with him, was Darth Vader's secret apprentice, which he used to kind of hunt down Jedi and do various missions for him, and he was sort of a secret from the Emperor. So kind of an intriguing possibility. There's also the possibility that it might be Darth Maul behind that mask, and that he had been resurrected by Night Sister magic. We know that he has a distinct connection to the Witches of Dathomir, so he was obviously killed off in Rebels. There's a confrontation in the desert between Darth Maul and Obi-Wan Kenobi, and Kenobi slays Darth Maul. So at this point, he would be dead in the storyline, but at the same time, Darth Maul has a habit of coming back to life after being presumed to be dead. There's also the possibility it could be a brand new character, and hopefully they'll explain the origin of the character if it is a brand new character. And again, how did this Inquisitor survive past the end of Return of the Jedi, where there really shouldn't be any more Inquisitors around? So that's kind of a mystery. Now, I want to talk a little bit about that end credit sequence. So there's a star map, which represents the path to Peridia, which is the other galaxy that's mentioned, where Thrawn has been banished to. And in that end credit sequence, there's a bunch of planets that are listed, and those include Arcana, Aearn, Garel, Lothal, Mandalore, Agmar, Dathomir, Yavin, Corellia, Cato Nemoidia, Duro, Basana, Coruscant, Cetos, Odin, and finally Peridia. And it's actually all these little lines going across the screen connecting these various places, and they all kind of converge on Peridia. There's actually 7 lines that converge at that point, and what those lines may represent could potentially be the 7 characters that we see in the series. So it'd be Ahsoka, Sabine, Hera, Morgan, Baylan, Shin, and Marrok. Those are 7 characters. So do those 7 lines represent those characters? I don't know, but it could be a clue that maybe all of them will end up, being trapped, or sent out to Peridia, which is in that other galaxy. So obviously, episode 3 is coming next, and I'm hoping at some point we will maybe get some flashbacks. I would love to see the actual introduction between Ahsoka meeting Luke Skywalker. That must have been sort of an eventful kind of thing, and we haven't seen that yet. Obviously, by the time we see them in the Book of Boba Fett, they've obviously met each other, and but I would love to know the precise circumstances of these two Jedi actually meeting each other. There's also Hayden Christensen is very much confirmed to be in this show at some point, and we actually hear his voice in one of the trailers. So whether or not that's done as a flashback to the Clone Wars, or if it's actually the ghost of Anakin Skywalker speaking to Ahsoka, we don't really know yet. To me, at least the dialogue that they put in the trailer sounded like actual lines from the time period of the Clone Wars. So, could have been done as a holographic recording that Ahsoka has, or something like that. But I would love it if we actually got, a full-on scene, including Hayden Christensen speaking to a young Ahsoka, or again his ghost talking to her and giving her some counsel. That stuff would be interesting. I don't know if we'll get that next episode, but I think it'd be cool to either have that kind of stuff established pretty early on, or maybe a flashback to explain a little bit about some of the other villain characters. Any of that kind of stuff would also be interesting. So, because we're at a point in the story where there's a lot of unknowns, and I'd rather it wasn't just done as an explanation, done as exposition. I actually think it'd be better if we actually see the scene for real, with the actors actually portraying what happened. So I'm excited for the series. So far, so good. The first 2 episodes were really quite excellent. And again, I don't think they're perfect. There's certain stuff that happens where you're sort of like, I'm not a fan of that. But at the same time, there's far more good than there is bad. So it ends up just being kind of nitpicks in terms of things that I find fault with. To me, it does seem very much like a continuation of Rebels, Dave Filoni's story. And so I'm intrigued. There's definitely some stuff in there that's unexpected. I wasn't really expecting to see, another Jedi Knight, survivor of Order 66. So it was obviously revealed in the trailer, so it didn't surprise me when I was watching it. But I'm surprised that he went down that route and decided to. He's taken a lot of risks with this series, and I think that's probably a bold move, and introducing another galaxy completely gives him actually a lot of freedom to tell another kind of story where it doesn't really step on, the canon of the Star Wars galaxy. If you can set it somewhere else and, pursue it with characters where it's not necessarily going to impact or be influenced by, the main story of Star Wars, that's probably... It frees you up a little bit so that you don't have to worry about, continuity so much. So I'm excited for it, and I hope you guys are too. If you have any thoughts about the series so far, please leave them in the comments and let me know. And I will leave a link to the full episode of my podcast where I went over the sort of recent history of Star Wars, and it sort of details, how we got to this place. And I go over some of the stuff that I liked, some of the stuff that I didn't like, in the sequel trilogy and so forth. So it's a good podcast. So if you haven't checked that out, feel free to check it out. Anyway, I hope you enjoyed this video, and I will see you in the next podcast. Have a great day.